And we have with us Soumya. Soumya, what a delight to have you here. Thank you so much for joining us.
So good afternoon, everyone. And I actually wanted to say that that was not an attention issue, that was a misinterpretation issue. I genuinely had no idea where the chin is. So that's the challenge you have in India with, our understanding of English itself is not to the level that I guess, sorry, I don't know your name, but I guess you thought, yeah. So what I'm going to do now, I have been, so I was in a roundtable yesterday. I missed a couple of sessions, but where do I point? Oh, sorry. Yeah, but one of the things that I have been hearing from everybody who has attended the sessions and every room that I go into is brands are everything. In some rooms I hear brands are nothing. What can be measured is what matters. What cannot be measured, what is intangible, let's park it aside. I hear about accountability. I hear about attribution. I hear about ROAS. I hear about click to buy. I hear a lot of different things. But one thing I definitely hear, and that is consumer. But the only problem is the version of consumer that everybody has is different. There is a digital consumer who seems to live and die on a platform, who wakes up to clicks. There is an offline consumer that CMOs are expected to meet through consumer immersions at 7:30 a.m. and then 9:30 p.m. at the scale that India has. There is our friend and neighbor and family who seem to do something completely different than what we think our consumer does. And then there is the famous say-do gap. So in good old times, when you said consumer, you thought of people like us. I come from a market research company. But today, there are multiple owners of consumer voice. So let me then, over the next 10 minutes or so, talk about the consumer in a way which is, we don't really know her. Let us make an attempt to understand her, which is what I believe we stand for, which is we don't sell anything. We don't sell ads. We don't sell media. We don't think we can create your brands for you. What we do is try and show the mirror of what the consumer is. So this is just some data from global and India. We do something called a global monitor. And there's consumer confidence data from RBI. Broadly speaking, I mean, this is a little before the war really hit, but Indians were feeling good about life. Were feeling good about, they had financial optimism. They were upbeat. There are worries, you can see in this itself, about our worry about living expenses. But generally speaking, we are feeling better than the world. Now, in this environment, it should be easy to sell. It should be easy for us to shell out money and pay for brands. But unfortunately, that's not what is happening. Brands, this is brand Z data from 10 years. This is brand value. We spoke a lot about enterprise value. This is brand value. And brand value, roughly speaking, as per our estimates, is about a third of the enterprise value. And brands are continuing to lose meaningful difference. You can see global brands, this is global top 100, have always remained at a certain level. But it's the Indian brands which have continuously gone down. The top 75 most valued Indian brands have lost meaningful difference. And that's, for me, a very important metric, because that means we are probably not either investing enough in brand, or we are not building brands in a way that people remember them. And that's what is happening. Brands are becoming better and better at getting chosen in the moment, but probably are struggling to be remembered. And if you actually go on the road and ask 100 people, which ads do you remember watching? And there's IPL going on, lots of ads on air. Just take a look at how many ads are actually being recalled. And that's important, because we keep believing that we can, through targeting, through personalization, make you remember. It's not happening. The memory structures are not building. And great creativity still has as much relevance today as it had earlier. This data splits out the 75 into 3 buckets. There are the survivors, which have remained on the brand Z top 75 for the last 10 years. Then there are the stalwarts, which have actually remained also consistent on equity. And there are the thrivers which have grown on equity, only 12 brands. Now, you could argue, if I'm still a valued brand, how does equity matter if I have still remained on that top 75 list? You know, that's the thing. When the rising tide will raise all the boats. When India's consumption boom happens, everybody will get some share of it. Question is, are you getting a fair share of it? Question is, are you getting searched for? Are you getting bought? Is it a demand pull, or is it just availability that is just making you take advantage of what was our overall domestic growth story? And that is why what's important is these thrivers have grown their brand value 2.5 times more. And they have done this through pricing power. Because finally, a brand is something you want to pay for. Brand is something that you want to aspire for. And that's why it's so important to keep investing in brand building, which creates memory structures that remain consistent over time. Shifting to the whole attention bit. There is a lot of media, there's a lot of targeting, there's a lot of fragmentation. And yesterday, in fact, we were discussing in our roundtable about, I was saying consumer fatigue is probably setting in. Maybe we don't see it because we are targeting even more, and maybe we are seeing short-term results. And that's the whole challenge, by the way, of some of these things like brand, because they don't show up in dashboards as fast as many of the others do. But there is fatigue setting in the sea of sameness. There is, especially in Gen Z, there is fatigue. And I've just put together, how to be a fashion brand. Just random pictures, Insta, and you can see the sea of sameness. So how do we build distinctiveness in a world like this is going to increasingly become a challenge. And therefore, what does break clutter? And it is a Contarian view, and I will leave you with it, is I do believe there is a space now for shared experiences, for shared culture, for something that matters not only to me, but to all of us in this room. Beyond sports, women's cricket team winning, the fact is there is a Dhurandhar that all of us, watched, right, I'm assuming, and it sort of, there is cinema. There are still web series that all of us watch. So there is that shared culture that we need to recognize, understand, and it doesn't disappear. The personalization does not make that shared culture disappear. And therefore, what are actually brands? Brands finally are cultural shortcuts. Brands are beyond contextual utility. They are a mirror to the culture that they have created around them. And this is a framework that we are starting to use, which is VIBE, which is visionary, inspiring, bold, and exciting. A vibrant brand delivers disproportionate cultural capital. This is global data on brand value, and a brand that is in the top end of vibrancy delivers much more cultural value than the other brands. Now, that's the entire point. You can, in the moment, get chosen. But it's when you build on those moments and create meaning, that's when you increase your chances of being chosen again and again and again. But culture is not just demography. There is a lot of times I'm asked to speak about Gen Z. What is Gen Z like? But the Gen Z in Delhi and the Gen Z in Kanpur, of course, have similarities. But are they identical? No. Gen Z in Gorakhpur is probably even more different. Now, it's possible that the Gen Z of Kanpur and Delhi are more similar than the Gen Z of Gorakhpur and Delhi. So there's obviously a spectrum there. It's also possible that the Gen Z in Gorakhpur is closer to what his parents were like than the Gen Z in Delhi. So this universality of Gen Z, or any such simplification that we create, doesn't really work in real life. And these are two examples. There's a Gen Z that is saying, love me, want me, see me. And there is an ambitious Gen Z that is actually saying, I can do it. And this reminds me of an interesting insight that I found. We were doing a study on hair oil. And you wouldn't expect, I mean, so we use the Neatscope framework. To all of you, I'm sure some of you may be familiar, those who are not. It's a human motivation framework. It goes from introversion, extroversion, and individual and collective. So normally you would expect that a metro boy would be the rebel, the red color. And the rural girl would be more, brown, which is basically caring and earthy. No, the rural girl emerged as the rebel because she's wanting to break away from her circumstances, and the metro boy was actually yellow, which is playful and fun. So it is an interest, there's a lot of interesting segmentation that is emerging even within Gen Z. And that's why it is in these intersectionality of subculture that growth lies. Often when we speak of AI is brilliant. I use AI a lot. I use AI to critique what I'm presenting, for example. But AI sometimes flattens it. AI sometimes tells you what you in a way know because it has happened. It is not going, and India has not happened. And that's the other thing that's very important. India is forming. India is evolving. Growth, there are so many categories that are not penetrated. Nothing that exists is going to tell us how it's going to happen in future. Did we know modern trade we are going to skip modern trade? Did we know we are going to have the kind of UPI infrastructure that we have and people will take to it to the extent they have? We didn't. And that is why we still need discovery in India, not only optimization. And culture is also multifaceted. There are multi-speed culture. There is slow culture and there is fast culture. Slow culture is what builds meaning and relevance. It is what is anchored to your brand values. Fast culture is how you activate it. What has ended up happening is we are using the two terms interchangeably today. And that's a concern because it's easy to do fast culture. It's easy to tag on to a viral trend. It's easy to have a meme. But it's very different when Amul does a meme because that's what they are used to. That's what you associate with them than a brand which you don't associate with it. So it's important to know when I'm expressing myself to the consumer, what am I building? The slow, deeper culture that takes time, that takes patience, which is your brand, or the expression of it, the activation of it. And as I have already said this, enduring brands are cultural shortcuts. I use the Maggie example. Manish spoke yesterday, so he's not in the room, but so let me now say it. I said it yesterday in the round table as well, that Pahadon Wali Maggie was not created by a creator. It was not created by an influencer. It was created by the consumer. The consumer used Maggie. And they sold it in the mountains. We used to go for trips. We started consuming it, and it was a discovery that it was an aha insight that yes, there's a Pahadon Wali Maggie. I have grown up with Maggie, so I have different versions of Maggie. I do know, and I do strongly believe, deep insights has made Maggie tremendously relevant to the Indian consumer. Deep insights is what led Maggie to come back from where they came back from after that crisis. Nike is ambition. It's ambition everywhere. It's ambition through time. It's ambition through cultures. And they express it. And Nike is always in the red space of Neatscope, and it has consistently remained in the red space. Across time, across culture. Now, sometimes we believe that these things slow us down. Thinking about brands sometimes slows us down because we need to respond fast, because there's so much agility in the market. We need to respond to that agility. But the reality is then we are not building to last. Then we are building for the moment. Then we should be clear we are building for the moment. It's when we think that we can do that and build to last that the problem comes up. The tension or the friction comes up. This is Nike. Everywhere it is the same red. The invincible, unvanquished hero within you, everywhere it is the same. So, I would like to say consumer journey is not linear. Everybody keeps saying consumer journey is not linear. The funnel has collapsed. Of course it has. When was it linear? You used to walk into a store, find a new brand, consume it, and make impressions about it in your mind and go back and have it. It was never linear. It was linear because we simplified it. We needed a framework of awareness to consideration to trial to whatever, repeat use. We needed a framework. We made it simpler. But actually, it was never linear. Now it's even more less linear, let's put it this way. But you still need to be relevant and meaningful at every point of that journey. That doesn't change. Linearity, non-linearity is a different issue. But the fact that you need awareness doesn't change. The fact that you need to be considered in the moment of consumption or purchase doesn't change. How you build it, how you execute it changes. So when we say the consumer has changed, I will humbly disagree. The consumer is getting exposed to a lot of things. In their mind, they are processing it in similar frameworks. We get different data because we now have an explosion of data. So we have 1,000 things we can look at and craft as many versions of consumer as we want. But that poor lady or that poor boy is exactly the same. The only difference is he's consuming a lot of content. That I agree. And therefore, you have a lot of influences that can play in his mind. But otherwise, it's not as different as we seem to think. And therefore, the fundamentals of what we are doing was never wrong. Nothing has changed in those fundamentals. And the reason why the meaningful difference is getting lost, and why I started with that, and I'll again come back to that, is because big brands often say, look, we have a lot to learn. Of course you have a lot to learn. But one thing you always did right, you built strong brands. You knew how to build brand equity. You knew investing in brand equity was important. I'm talking to big brands. So don't question that. The fact is that is declining, and you are declining. It's just that how long does it take? You can last on your legacy for 2 years, 3 years. Some brands can last on it for 5 years also. But at some point, the decline will show. So it's not that the smaller players have come and had your lunch. It's just that you forgot what really made your lunch so special. I think that is what the big brands need to keep in mind. And I'll end with this. We need to reclaim the power and narrative of our brand as brand owners, whichever, wherever, whatever brand that we have. Because we, and only we, understand what we want to communicate, what we want to express. And that is, it's very important that the brief comes from the marketer, that the brief is designed by us. This is what my brand should be. This is what my brand should be across every touch point. So ownership of the brand is important. And culture is a growth lever. Culture is a multiplier. Personalization is important. Personalization drives relevance in that moment. But culture and your ownership of culture or a demographic or a cohort, I would say, ensures that the dice is loaded in your favor. And I think final point would be optimize the feed, absolutely. But let's not outsource meaning to the feed. The meaning, just because something correlates, and this famous correlation and causation point, just because 2 data points are correlating with each other, or there is some absolutely phenomenal mathematics behind it, does not change the reality that it's you who needs to own the brand. And I'll end with the thing that I have been sort of thinking over. The reason we used to live in a probabilistic world, a world of possibilities and uncertainties, what basically that means that I'm never sure of what is going to happen if I take this decision. I mean, there was always a chance it could go wrong. That is how, that's how marketing developed, right? You took decisions based on the information you had. And it was always probabilistic. Research that I do is always probabilistic. What has happened is data makes us feel it is deterministic. Data makes us feel that I am being able to attribute to each and every dollar getting spent. Measurement is critical, and I love data. But measurement cannot replace cannot replace meaning. I think that's the word I'm saying. Too much of measurement sometimes just creates spurious relationships, which we need to be careful about. So I think I want to end it here. I did want to sort of say one word. I started with that we don't sell ads, we don't claim that we can build brands, we don't sell media. You know what that makes us do? We sort of own objectivity. I can stand here and say all this because I have no agenda. Apart from the fact that everybody should do a little more research, that's definitely an agenda, but I genuinely have no agenda, and therefore that objectivity or that mirror is something that we can show, and that objectivity is definite competitive advantage to every brand today, and we all need that one objective voice in the room. So that's it, bang on time. Thank you, and I would love to catch up with you sometime. Thank you.